We move to the first substantive part of the meeting today, and that's with respect of public input. We have had 4 requests received, all accepted. We have made it clear to our presenters that in public input we try very hard to keep to the 5-minute limit. Some of these presentations today are to do with fairly substantive matters, but we'll request that presenters please endeavour to do all they can to keep around that 5-minute mark and to allow a little bit of time for questions. So our first presenter today, and I think that presentation will have been emailed through to members. It's on Nexus. Is Anna Thorburn from the Gulf Harbour Ferry Group, and Anna will address the committee on behalf of that ferry users group regarding the Gulf Harbour ferry service. Thank you, Anna, for coming along today, and the floor is now yours.
Sorry, can you please use the microphone in front of you? Thank you.
Start again. Kia ora tātou, ko mangawhau te maunga. Ko muriwai te awa, no tamaki ahau. Ko Thorburn toko whānau, ko Anna toko ingoa. Firstly, I'd like to thank Mayor Brown, Councillor John Watson and fellow councillors for allowing us to speak here today. I wish to acknowledge that Tamaki Makaurau, our Auckland, is hurting. Our maunga, our awa and our moana have seen significant devastation across the region and nationally beyond. Your leadership and tireless efforts to see restoration of access to Tamaki Makaurau, her infrastructure strengthened and ultimately keeping Auckland moving has proven resilience and leadership, and for this we are grateful. Thank you and ngā mihi. I'm here to represent over 5,000 people in our community and over 1,000 passengers who have come together to raise concern around the persistent failure and loss of confidence in Fuller's as a provider of the Gulf Harbour ferry service. We seek permanence of commuter public transport by ferry from Gulf Harbour. It has been in place for 26 years, and in the last 2 years we have seen that service diminish significantly. We want to understand what levers there are within the current contract to improve the service, and want to understand why there's only 6 years contract signed and not 12. We are seeking assurances that we will see an improvement in the service. Our passengers have experienced many impacts following the pandemic response and regional weather and national weather issues over the last 2 years. We have seen a consistent failure by Fuller's to provide a full service. In October last year, we met as a community group with Fuller's and AT and reported a passenger failure rate of services scheduled at 34%. Now in February, that has risen to 37% of all scheduled ferry trips are no longer by ferry. What we experience is not world-class public transport as proclaimed by Fuller's. We want a ferry service, it is what we pay for. Our infrastructure can currently not support the number of vehicles that are commuting 1.5 to 3 hours a day in both directions from Rodney District to the city centre. Waka Kotahi needs to restore our roads, and we need Auckland Transport to impress on Fuller's to keep our waka floating. Over the next couple of slides, you will see personal experiences from our commuters. I'm not going to go through these one by one. What I ask of you is to join our Gulf Harbour Ferry user group and see the day in, day out experiences of commuters being left behind, people who are not physically mobile or capable of morphing from Pier 8 ferry terminal to the bottom of Customs Street in a matter of minutes to catch an alternative bus that drives away because they're not there within that selected time frame. We have the opportunity to save 3.3 million tonne a year on carbon emissions by putting the boats back in the water and getting cars and buses off the road for that route. We simply want the ferry service because that is what we pay for. We don't trust the data that you will receive as passenger numbers are dwindling, and we hold Fuller's personally accountable for that. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. The communications are appalling, and we've found as a community that we rely on each other to collate all of the alert data and bring it together to make sense of the multiple platforms that we look at. What you see here is what we are asked to go to. Sorry, I can see a hand raised. Where we actually look is across 9 different platforms, and it's clear to us that there is a lack of communication between Fuller's, Auckland Transport and Ports of Auckland, particularly off the back of last week's incident when we had a ship coming in to be refuelled right on peak ferry new time. In page 18 and 19 of your agenda, there is a quote by Auckland Transport that there is a 97% reliability rate. We can test that because our data that we capture on a day-to-day basis shows that 37% of all ferry crossings are cancelled or replaced by bus from the 1st of January 2022 to the 10th of February this year. On the next slide, you'll see in the shadowed area the number of possible ferry trips per month. The green bars show you which ferry trips are operated by bus or alternative transport. The small blue line at the bottom is what we would be willing to accept as a failure rate because of the 18% impact of weather that results in cancellations to our service. 78% of cancellations are operational constraints, and that's been the excuse from Fuller's for quite some time. What we would like to see next from councillors is perhaps consideration for focusing on providing commuter services on the peak times where we need them most. We're willing to let go of daytime services that don't have the passenger intake or the revenue that you'd desire. We want to see full reporting on recruitment and contracted routes. We want to understand the pain that Fuller's experience in terms of penalties when they don't provide a boat to service our community. Thank you for your time. Ngā mihi most to our skippers and crew who consistently turn up on a day-to-day basis to serve us well.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Anna. We have a time for a few succinct questions. Councillor Walker.
Sure. So I certainly follow the Facebook page. I'm a member. One of the suggestions that you put is having the ferry dock at Gulf Harbour. So it's there, so it can kick off a morning run. Why can't that happen?
So during the COVID lockdown in 2020, Fuller's relocated the entire Gulf Harbour fleet of 3 ferries to the downtown area, the reason being for operational reasons. It allows them to redeploy crew and service the inner routes. What we see now, and it's not just our service that is impacted, Waiheke, which is obviously the priority service user, being isolated. They're also having a lot of their ferries cancelled and rerouted. Since the Devonport frequency was increased, as well as the summer runs increasing, we just don't have Fuller's just don't have the crew to support that. We have asked why that is, and it's clearly evident to us that people leave managers, not jobs.
Councillor Chris Fletcher online.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for your presentation. I would like you to just outline, and I understand you're a health professional, but what the impact in a health sense has been on this unreliability and perhaps on you personally.
I can speak for a lot of people on this. There's a lot of anxiety and stress invoked. And I can give an example of last evening at 9 p.m. I was prepared with my ferry tag for AT, all of my things to come down by ferry today. At 10:10, an alert came in from Fuller's to say that the morning services were cancelled and there was no suggestion of alternative transport, and the poor English in it suggested that we would catch the bus from H&M stop. This morning at 5:45, I left in my car to drive down. I was going to stop at Silverdale Station to catch the bus, but buses were cancelled there also. And an alert came in at 6:15 to say that there was alternative bus transport at the ferry terminal for 6:30. In the past, I have been stranded in town, and as a result, despite asking Fuller's for assistance to get home, ended up catching an Uber myself because my toddler was left stranded at daycare, and if I didn't get the Uber, I wouldn't have got to him. So That's one mother. There's many mothers, there's many employees of organisations that have been challenged by their employers because they're getting late to work because of the unreliability of the service. And what that does is it pushes us out of public transport, and we just don't trust AT.
Okay, thank you.
They've become the apologist.
Just
Thank you, Anna.
quick questions, Councillor Lee and Councillor Ferry.
Thank you, and good morning, Anna, and thank you for that presentation. As a ferry user myself since the 1970s, I'm interested to know whether you have noticed a deterioration in recent years, and when do you think that started to happen?
I'm a Mangawhau girl by life. I've lived in Mount Eden most of my life, and I moved to the coast in 2013 and have lived between the two. Since moving permanently there in 2019, the service has deteriorated significantly in the last 2 years. It worsened the first peak after COVID when the boats were relocated to downtown. Since December, May 2022, we saw a quarter of all services replaced by bus. Since December, we're now seeing over half of the services scheduled replaced by bus.
It is measurable then, isn't it? I must say I've noticed that as well. And I'd have to say, you asked me 5 years ago, I would have said that Fuller's ferry services were one of the best performing PT modes that we had, but I can't say that now. Can I just say that in regard to the berthing of cruise ships, I'm aware of that problem, and I have approached the CE of the Ports of Auckland, and I've also taken it up with the acting CEO of Auckland Transport, because the Harbour Master reports to Auckland Transport as part of the Auckland Transport Empire, and with the request that the Harbour Master talks to the port about a more rational approach to berthing cruise ships. In other words, we have a premier cruise ship terminal at Queen's Wharf, not in the ferry basin.
Thank Councillor Lee. I think that's relevant, but I think we'll save that. There is going to be an item on the ferries later on. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. Just a really quick question. Reading your presentation, you mentioned some of the issues around mobility, and I know one of the problems we've had over this side with replacing trains with buses at the last minute is there are people who would use a train but can't use a bus. So, for example, they're on a bicycle or they've got a mobility device that doesn't fit on a bus. Is that an issue with these ferry cancellations as well?
It is an issue, but I don't believe that it's overly well reported to Fuller's to manage. Okay, one of the other issues is the fact you can't get your e-bike on a bus. So those of us that wanted to bike to the ferry and then bike to our jobs, we can't do that.
Okay, thank you, Anna, for your presentation. Councillor Walker will move to receive the public input from Anna, and thank you for attending. Councillor Lee will second that. Anna, by way of feedback, the material that you have presented to us today will be of use later on in the meeting, and as part of resolutions, I suspect that will emerge from that, because you've touched on the main points, but there is indeed a lot more that could be said about this service and ferry services generally. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Opposed? Carried. Our next presenter is Will McKenzie and Arvind Daji, who will be talking to the Auckland Transport Plan. So I'll call Will and Arvind to the table now. And their presentation is also on Nexus. If you need to speak, just press the little button there that's got talk beside it. I think it's on your right-hand side.
Could you just let us have the extra printouts when they're done, please? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please follow our slides on the big screen. These options for your consideration have been assessed as required by the Resource Management Act. Option selection is a field which I studied called Operations Research. Option 1. The 1946 plan for Auckland provided for rail rapid transit, road building and the development of Auckland. The 1976 plan mirrored the 46 and earlier plans. The 2012 to 2042 plan is for a comprehensive, strategic, long-term, high-quality, joined-up, integrated transport network for Auckland by 2042 that minimises emissions. An outline plan was subsequently adopted, however, the 2042 plan still has legal weight. The 2042 plan provides for rail rapid transit from Avondale to Airport, which could be built for use by rolling stock of the current design for $3 to $6 billion. Alternatively, the sector could be built for heavy rail metro rolling stock, as used in many cities, for $2 to $4 billion. Metro rolling stock is capable of navigating sharp corners and climbing and descending steep inclines. Options 1A and 1B were not properly assessed by Auckland Light Rail, including by not determining an indicative cost. Option 2. The 2042 plan provides for bus rapid transit on routes including the Northern Busway. A bus-only road can only carry around 70,000 passengers per day. However, a high-capacity BRT can carry 700,000 passengers, more than any light rail line. This is BRT in Lima, Peru, that carries 700,000 passengers per day. This is BRT in Jakarta, they carry over 1 million per day. Electric buses can be powered by next-generation overhead wire technology. The North Western Motorway is already wide enough to accommodate central running BRT. BRT on the North Western Motorway can be linked to the Northern Busway via Spaghetti Junction, with central city stations allowing for buses to through-run the central city. Building options 1 and 2 would complete Auckland's high-quality joined-up transit network by 2030. To our knowledge, BRT has not been considered for any busway in Auckland. Option 3, active transport. Like the bridges shown, the clip-ons bottom right are also wide enough for 3 lanes, but only carry 2. These bridges accommodate 2 lanes and active transport. At bottom right, active transport and wide lanes can be accommodated on each clip-on. Protected 2.4 metre active transport paths can be created by moving the existing vehicle barriers inwards 2.1 metres. This is a photo of the clip-ons under construction with the alignment of a relocated steel barrier. A Waka Kotahi Commission report found that this option can provide safe walking and cycling without reducing the number of lanes, but also found that the steel deck prevents fixation of a barrier on the deck. UC Professor of Engineering has given a preliminary view that he can't see why it is not possible to secure a steel barrier to the clip-on decks. Installing active transport paths would allow the polyurethane coating on the paths to be reduced in thickness, reducing the weight of each clip-on by at least 50 tonnes. WK has stated that it will not provide active transport on the bridge, but has not provided the evidence that it supports its decision. Option 4. The central lanes and the clip-ons cannot accommodate the heaviest trucks on New Zealand's roads. The current crossing is a significant missing link in the Upper North Island's freight network. Over time, steel bridges can require expansion and or rehabilitation. Some examples. The Huey Pilong Bridge near New Orleans was widened on its existing piers in 2013. A common technique is to build a replica bridge next to an original so as not to detract from built heritage. Frequently, a bridge is built with as many lanes as needed, and when, as expected, more lanes are later needed, an adjacent identical bridge is built. This technique was used at historic Natchez on the Mississippi River, and at Tampa Bay, Florida, and in downtown New Orleans. Another technique is to build the adjacent replica bridge on temporary piers. This allows the bridge to be replaced on the existing piers, which is extremely cost effective. At bottom right, the Milton-Madison Bridge was replaced in 2014 at a cost of only $104 million US. Murray Johnson is the world's leading exponent of this and similar bridge building techniques and works for Stantec, which has an office in Newmarket. The technique could be used to build a new Auckland Harbour Bridge to the east of the existing bridge on temporary piers. The replica bridge would then be slid 40 metres west onto the refurbished piers, allowing multiple modes to cross the harbour safely. The replacement would take around 5 years, cost in the order of $2 billion. The new bridge would be wider, but otherwise near identical to the bridge as built in 1959. AU Associate Professor Clifton is of the opinion that the bridge replacement proposal is feasible. Waka Kotahi have been asked if option 4 will be assessed, including for cost and climate impact. An answer has not been received. Thank you. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Will, for that very interesting presentation there. Opportunity for questions. Councillor Walker.
Sure. Thanks for the presentation. In respect of the quick fixes that you indicate, 1A, 1B and 2, given, as you point out, that these are very affordable, there's a huge difference between the cost of these, for example, and the conceivably 30 billion light rail alone. What's the implementation time around getting some of this up and running, and has there been any preliminary work done in that respect?
Thank you. The rail corridor has been there to Onehunga for around 50 years. So the work to extend it, particularly to Three Kings, could be started immediately. You could start clearing the land before you even got resource consent. And Kiwi Rail's been building railway tracks for 125 years, so I think they could get on and do it pretty quickly.
And just a further supplementary, it would be fair to say that that would build on the significant investment that we've already incurred in the CRL. Is that correct?
Indeed, if you see the 2042 plan, that includes the CRL, and that plan is before the CRL was approved. The CRL was approved with this extension to Onehunga and the airport in mind. It's what makes the CRL worth the money.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Will. So 2 questions, one by Councillor Darby online and then Councillor Ferry.
Thanks, Chair. Kia ora, Will. Will, look, you've previously been before us, you've been advocating for trackless trams. You're not advocating for that as you did so fervently then. Today
No,
you're advocating.
Councillor Darby, I did not advocate trackless trams.
Okay, well, look, maybe it wasn't formally, but I do recall you talking to me about that. But look, today.
Sorry, I've never advocated trackless trams in any way.
Okay, so Councillor, you want to
so
ask
today,
a question?
Yeah, so I want to get a sense of how, say, option 1A, how does it connect and integrate with the City Rail link, with the additional Waitemata Harbour connection, where the work that we're starting to see calls for rapid transit priority. We need rapid transit priority going northwest to reinforce bus connections and rail that's already there. So how does this integrate? That's my first question. My second question is, I'm assuming you've read the Auckland Light Rail IBC, the indicative business case. You mention a range of figures here going from light rail to tunnel light rail to light metro of 9, and then you've got a range that doubles it for the tunnel light rail and doubles it for light metro. Can you just tell me, my first question, Chair, then I'll have another, is just explain the integration and explain where you got that top of the range number from, which does not appear in the IBC.
Thank you. The integration happens as per the Auckland Strategic Transport Network Plan 2042. That shows rail rapid transit going into the CRL to the airport. It shows bus rapid transit going across the harbour. And as elsewhere in the presentation, bus rapid transit can have a higher capacity than light rail. So we see bus rapid transit and rail rapid transit providing integrated transit right across Auckland. And the second question, The figures of $9 billion, or the first figure that we've given for the cost is the figure from the IBC. The second figure is double that, which was given by New Zealand Treasury, who I'm not in the habit of arguing with. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. Just
Sorry,
really
Chair,
quick
I've got a second question there.
You've had to, Councillor Daji. We'll go to Councillor Ferry. We've got quite a bit to get through here, if you don't mind.
My question's very short,
So
so
be it.
you might have time to come back to him. So I'm just really interested in regard to the RBT staff. We've just heard from someone in regard to the difference between catching a ferry and catching a bus for those who are, for example, using a bicycle.
Sure.
How have other cities dealt with that issue with their RBT networks, if they have?
Rapid bus transit. From what I've seen, rapid bus around the world, like most rapid rail, doesn't include people carrying bikes. But in Auckland, with our lower loads, if you can see from the pictures of the bus in Jakarta, there's a lot more room in the bus. So you'd have much more chance of carrying bikes. And the internal cab space would be very similar to a train. So I think you'd have more chance to carry the bikes separately outside the vehicle or on a trailer. Is a little bit messy if you've got high capacity transit of any kind, but certainly with the more space inside the bus, the level boarding, so you can roll your bike straight on. So certainly for bicycles and for people particularly with mobility with wheelchairs, it's really important that they can have level boarding, and this brings it to buses, which we think is a great thing.
Thank you, Councillor Ferry. You will see a motion on the screen to receive the input from Will McKenzie and Arvind Daji and thank them for attending. I'm very happy to move that. Seconded by Councillor Walker. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. And thank you both, gentlemen, for that very comprehensive presentation, and that material will be retained and no doubt can be pressed onto the Mayor as he continues his journey through his transport plan with the Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Councillors and Mr Mayor, who I've just sent around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next presenter today is Geoff Upson, and Geoff is presenting in his personal capacity as a local board member here, not on behalf of the local board, but as a board member who's taken an interest in the recent changes to the transport network, particularly as they go to the installation of speed tables and speed bumps and the impact that they are having on the transport network. Welcome, Geoff, and you've got 5 minutes. Away you go.
Is that on? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, obviously speed bumps is probably the most serious issue which I'm personally seeing out there on the road. I just wanted to remind everyone I am here on my personal capacity and not representing the Botany Local Board, which I am an elected member of. I'm only one of 9 there, and therefore my views today are my own, and also the views of the community who voted for me, but not the local board. I just wanted to point out, in 2021, in all of New Zealand, we had 0 fatal crashes on pedestrian crossings. 0 fatal crashes on pedestrian crossings. And so building pedestrian crossings into raised speed table pedestrian crossings is not going to save any lives, because it didn't cost any lives when they were flat, before they were raised. There were no lives lost. Yes, we have had some in other years, but if we look at 2021 with 0 fatals on any pedestrian crossings in all of the country, that's certainly not good statistics when we're spending $260,000 per raised pedestrian speed table. It is absolutely ludicrous that any government department has taken money away from road maintenance and other important infrastructure maintenance and upgrades to build something the community does not want. I'm a tradesman, and that's my main source of income as a tradesman. Everyone else that's in the trades, we have trade vehicles. We need to travel around, and putting these speed bumps on main arterial routes and state highways, in our opinion, in the opinion of the people I represent, is inappropriate, and it doesn't add any benefit to anybody. Like I said, in 2021, there were 0 fatal crashes on pedestrian crossings in all of the country, raised or not raised. Speed bumps, block drains, cycle lanes. Some of you will be aware, Upper Harbour Drive in Greenhithe has had, this is as of January, the spending has gone up. But as of January, the spending on Upper Harbour Drive to build a separated cycle lane, there was no injuries before it was separated with these big concrete blocks. The spending to put those concrete blocks in was $2,117,163. So over $2 million to put in some cycle lane concrete blocks that nobody wanted. People have been injured, cyclists have been injured, and cars have been written off after impacting with these concrete blocks, and there were no injuries before these concrete blocks were put in. Potholes on the sealed and unsealed road network could be repaired for a fraction of the amount of money spent on speed tables. Another idea I have is spending the climate action targeted rate, or the Qatar, on some of the overdue drain maintenance on our road network. The speed limits, back in 2019, we all found out the speed limits were being reduced, much to our horror and disgust as a road user. We had, it was advertised that $700 million was allocated to the speed management program, $700 million, which could have potentially been used to fix some potholes. I'm not sure quite where that program is. I've tried to search for that recently, and that sort of seems to have disappeared. So I'm not sure how much of that 700 million was spent, or maybe the whole lot was spent and it's run out and now we've moved on to something else. Again, that's pretty much it, really. So just like I said, I'm here to represent the people who use the roads. We're very, very upset with some of the changes that have been happening to our road network, especially from the point of view as tradespeople, freight operators, emergency services, and in a sense, anybody who has no option but to drive. I know there's going to be some benefits to cyclists and public transport users, but like myself, it's not viable for me to carry a sheet of jib onto a bus. It's just not practical. And hopefully I've got some questions to be answered, but again, like I said, no more speed bumps, please.
Okay, Geoff, thanks for your presentation. We do indeed have some questions. First question from Councillor Henderson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of demand for speed tables, in most cases it actually comes from the local schools and local residents where they want children to be safely walking and cycling to their school neighbourhood. So what would you say to those schools that do lobby us to put speed tables in?
Now, are we talking about schools on the state highway, or are we talking about schools that are in a little subdivision? I mean, just a bit of clarification would be great. Thank you.
I think my question was perfectly clear. I'll repeat it if you like. So primary schools and high schools as well lobby us all the time to put speed tables around their school neighbourhoods so that their students can walk and cycle to school. I think that's a very clear question. What would you say to those schools when they do lobby us for those things?
Okay, I'll give you two answers. Okay, so first of all, if we've got a school in a small subdivision that is not on a main road or not on a state highway, well, absolutely, that's up to that community that's affected by that. And I'm not going to get in the way of a genuine request from the majority of the public. But for example, where I live in Kaukopakapa, on State Highway 16. Now, State Highway 16, for those of you who don't know, runs from the ports of Auckland up to Wellsford. Part of it is a motorway and part of it is a single lane each direction. Now, Kaukopakapa is an important part of that state highway network, and at the moment there is a proposal to build 3, depending on who you talk to, there's potentially going to be 5 raised pedestrian speed tables in Kaukopakapa on State Highway 16. Now, in my opinion, and obviously the opinion of everyone who voted for me and supports what I'm doing here today, that is inappropriate. We don't want the speed bumps on the state highway network or important transport routes. So what I would say to those schools is, again, 2021, 0 fatals on the pedestrian crossings at all, whether they were raised or not raised. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. 2 final questions, one from Councillor Newman and one from Councillor Sayers.
Good morning, Geoff. So you and I are not going to run every aspect of the issue around traffic calming. There's some where I think it's appropriate, some which are not. And certainly to put raised pedestrian crossings on regional arterials like the Great South Road, that's a real push for me because there are the reasons why they're regional arterials. But what I'm curious to know, actually, just reflecting on recent storm events, and since you're here, is your reflections about the state of the substructure of the roading network in the northwest, because you've taken a lot of rain up there, but prior to that there seemed to be quite significant anecdotal evidence of the sealed road network in the northwest really struggling already because of water inundation and causing, it appeared to be more than just little potholes. Some of these were quite cratered, and there's patch ups and fixes going on all over the place. Have you got any sense of scalability of the work to roll out through that area to do that remedial repairs pending road reconstruction in the northwest?
Most of what I've seen as far as flood damage is to do with block drains. And so I know our mayor's talked about this quite a lot. And if there's a block drain near your home, get out there before the storm and check it's cleared. I've shared this on my social media as well. You know, while it is the Auckland Transport's responsibility to make sure the drains are cleared and functioning, Auckland Transport doesn't have the capacity to go and inspect every drain and culvert. Auckland Transport relies on complaints and reports from the public, and if it's easy enough to just sort it out with a spade in 2 minutes, you know, people could just do it themselves and save their homes and the roads that they rely on. As far as scaling the work that needs to be done, it's not an issue of clearing flood damage. It's an issue of catching up on the overdue road maintenance, drainage clearing, vegetation clearing. All of those things need to be taken care of, and the storm damage, while it's significant, the storm damage is not that much in comparison to the overdue maintenance, which Auckland Transport is behind on.
Final question, Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's probably segues in from Councillor Newman's question. Just through you, John, thank you, Geoff, for your presentation. Obviously, there's representatives from Auckland Transport that are listening to you and also dialed in on the call. But could I just perhaps pick up a little bit on? I didn't quite catch what you thought the average cost per speed table was. And my question is around that kind of whatever that figure is, Geoff. You know, you just touched on about the OPEX and the maintenance side of things. Obviously, those building those speed bumps would be out of a capital spend budget. So, have you got any ideas about if there was to be redeployed, that capital spend, what you thought that might go into rather than the speed bump, if that's clear?
So the average price or the price which I've seen through the local board documentation and other publicly available documentation around raised pedestrian speed tables is a figure of $260,000. So that's just over $250,000 per raised pedestrian speed table. So it's a huge amount of money. I mean, you can buy a high-end sports car for that. And in actual fact, if we use some of these cheaper methods of sealing unsealed roads, that would go 2.6 kilometres theoretically. So the next question, OPEX and CAPEX. You know, like I have some financial difficulties of my own, and while I'd love to put aside some money for a new car, you know, and call that CAPEX, you know, I have to use everything I've got available just to put food on my table and diesel in my ute. So if we have to juggle CAPEX and OPEX in order to catch up on some of the overdue road maintenance, you know, so be it. You know, when we're talking about CAPEX at the moment, the only thing we seem to be building is speed bumps, and the community doesn't want that. So if we had to cancel some speed bumps to catch up on some overdue road maintenance, clearing some drainage, and resealing the roads to get rid of the potholes, I think the community would support that, certainly in the short term. Hey, thank you so much for your question, Greg. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Geoff, for those answers. We have a motion on the screen now, moved by Councillor Sayers, seconded by Councillor Lee, to receive the public input from Geoff Upson and to thank him for attending. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thanks very much, Geoff. Final presenters in public input today come in the form of Tony Skelton and Greg McKeown, who appear before us on behalf of the Coalition of Concerned Auckland Communities, and they will be talking regarding the infrastructure issues currently being faced by Auckland Council and no doubt exacerbated by events of the last couple of weeks. Welcome, gentlemen. The talk button is to your right. When you're ready, away you go.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to address you this morning. I am Tony Skelton, and my colleague on my right is Greg McKeown. We are both long-standing residents of Auckland, and our role today is simply to be the messengers. The people we are representing are really concerned about the state of this city's infrastructure and its apparent lack of ability to cope with current and future demands. The purpose of our attendance is to present a petition signed by 30 community groups requesting Council to withdraw Plan Change 78. Recent weather events have demonstrated the inadequate capacity and condition of Auckland's wastewater and stormwater infrastructure for today's housing, let alone the type of intensification promoted by Plan Change 78. Insurance industry professionals have estimated that claims could exceed $1 billion. Add to that all the consequential social and economic costs of the late January flood and future climate predictions, the reality hits home. The Council needs to rethink Plan 78. Developing urban transport, wastewater, stormwater and other infrastructure should be an evidence-based optimisation exercise, which takes into account characteristics which are unique to a city, the outcomes sought and the funding available. This government's one-size-fits-all legislation takes away Auckland Council's ability to plan as Auckland's needs and is particularly problematic when it comes to infrastructure. The unitary plan agreed by Aucklanders in 2016 took a more focused approach to intensification, actually making it easier and more cost-effective to use existing infrastructure and develop new infrastructure. We need a transport and water infrastructure audit to determine options which are fundable and practicable. Given recent events, it would be irresponsible for Council to proceed with a major plan change before that audit is completed. The attached petition, signed by 30 community organisations and represents thousands of ratepayers, requests that Council withdraws Plan Change 78. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Tony. Greg, have you got anything to add to that, or just want to open the floor to questions at this stage? Okay, yeah, so we have a couple of questions in the name of Councillor Walker and Councillor Newman.
Sure. I understand you've done some investigation around costings. Are there any costings that you're familiar with that Auckland Council has done in respect of the cost of addressing the infrastructure issues and specifically stormwater and sewage that you've identified?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Can you repeat that?
I'm not aware of that.
Thank you.
Councillor Newman.
Thank you very much. I'm certainly don't want to cast myself in the role of pilot here, but whilst I have some real sympathy for the argument on Plan Change 78, to an extent this council and other councils are having to respond to the directions set down by Parliament with respect to giving effect to the NPSUD, its objectives and policies. I would certainly want to see Parliament act to rescind a number of aspects of the legislation that was passed with both sides of the House agreeing. But what I want to know is what is Parliament's obligation in your eyes to enable councils to act with confidence that Plan Change 78 can be withdrawn and that we could default back to the existing Auckland Unitary Plan, which is in itself arguably not sufficiently contextualised on evidence, given that we've seen these drainage catchments not holding up.
If I could take that, Tony.
Yeah.
I mean, Auckland Council has the obligation first and foremost to do what's best for Auckland, and we've seen Christchurch do something different in terms of leadership, and they are developing a different intensification plan, which doesn't have, in particular, the MDRS obligations in it. So the enabling legislation, I think in section 80, says in black and white that once an IPI process has been notified, it can't be withdrawn. But I think that's a small contest for council to take on. And that needs to be done, and I think there are probably levers that council can do. But what the petition asks for is it to be withdrawn, but at a minimum a stopping of the process and an audit, because if we looked at, for instance, your section 32s in council's own work, there's no examination in the section 32s of what happens at the bottom of a catchment when you build far more intensely at the top of a catchment. And there, we've got a point at point 4 where we say, you need some evidence-based approaches. It's all right to design all those houses, but if it's impracticable or unfundable in the future, or not efficient because there are other more efficient options to build houses elsewhere, we shouldn't be building them in that catchment.
Final question, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. A quick one. Would your organisation support more housing to be enabled in places that aren't flood prone and less housing for places that are?
We're representing the organisations with respect, Mr. Henderson, but we can't answer on behalf of 30 organisations.
Okay, to follow up, because I'm a bit confused. So, does your organisation discuss the issue of flood-prone areas? I'm unclear as to why this has come to us in that case.
Why it's come is because 30 community groups, and it's really just the top of an iceberg, 30 community groups have enough concern about Plan Change 78 because they've looked at the lack of examination of infrastructure and a cost-benefit analysis and a practicability of building in some areas. And in particular, the MDRS of the half of the equation is more problematic than intensifying around corridors and centres. Arab have done a study recently that says, from Nairobi to New York, Auckland, are the most spongeable city there is at the moment in the world in a study. If we're the most spongeable, and if you look what's happened, and we've got a plan that actually makes us less spongeable by implementing MDRS everywhere, then we should stop and look. Even if you want to run that argument, we should stop and look at what we're doing, because it hasn't been argued or discussed. All that Plan Change 78 has done so far is take a qualifying matter and say we're going to account with respect to stormwater, account for 551 properties that are currently in floodplains. That's not what we're talking about. That's today's floodplains. What we're talking about is the ability to match the provision of infrastructure, stormwater, wastewater, transport with land development, and there's been no consideration of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Mr. Mayor, wrap this up.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I've had the sympathy with that. I would like to see if we can refer this to the Planning Committee, because the Planning Committee is actually undergoing a review of what we're going to learn from the last 2 or 3 weeks of impacts. And so it's probably, and it's you're asked for a planning solution to a degree to a physical problem, but we are having a discussion on that thing. So I'd like to get the chairperson to refer this to the other committee. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly in respect of the petition, we're happy to pass that on to the planning committee given the request. Okay, thank you very much, Tony and Greg, for that excellent presentation. Councillor Fletcher would like to move that we receive the input from Tony Skelton and Greg McKeown regarding infrastructure issues and thank them for attending the meeting. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lee. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to all our presenters and public input today. There was a very high quality of presentation, and I just would like to make the point that that information as presented in a number of instances will form the basis of ongoing discussions. So please be assured that if there is a follow-up to the exact material, and certainly in respect of the ferries there will be communication from the community, from this committee back to you. Okay, thank you. We now move